Hello, guys. Man, it's been a rough few weeks for me. Was not well. Kept a close eye on the football, but I was sick for a few weeks and couldn't record. And being a solo act can make it tricky when you're coughing and sickly. So decided to just chill and come back when I was good and ready. Lots has happened since the last time I recorded, but I think I'm gonna try and use the international break to look at separate things that happened in the football calendar since basically late February, early March. But the most recent thing is what I'm going to talk about, which is the Carabao Cup final in this video and podcast episode. I watched that game with a friend of mine who was a Manchester United fan, and going into it, I'd been saying, I don't think it's bottling if we lose the game. I also was saying things like, the quadruple is not going to be, I think we're going to be able to celebrate this year. At some point, something's going to give. And if I had to choose with three trophies I wanted Arsenal to win as an Arsenal fan, the Carabao Cup would be the fourth, on the tiers of what I want. But making it to the final, I can never say I'm happy to lose a final. So I'm not going to do that here today. I am definitely gutted that Arsenal lost that final, even though the trophy itself was not something I went into the final thinking I'm going to lose sleep over. And I think it was the manner of the loss rather than the loss itself that made it difficult to digest and made it seem like the world is falling apart. That second half and having no answer to anything Manchester City did to us in that second half made it very tricky as an Arsenal fan to try and work through my paces, work through my emotions about what I'd just seen in that game. But I'm going to try and talk about it because, I listen to quite a lot of Arsenal leaning content creators, and I've tried to stay away from some of the mainstream commentary around this stuff because there's a lot of sensationalist takes. And if you pay attention, you would have seen a lot of these takes coming because most of the big publication houses in England were already pushing the quad narrative. And I was always trying to be cautious of them and that kind of talk. But some of my Arsenal supporting friends kind of fell for it. And with that comes the insane amount of pressure then that you put on your team to have to win all the games and all the games, even though you want the team to win all the games, but it's unrealistic. That's why greater teams than this Arsenal team have never done the quadruple. And it's really just only a thing in England now because some of the other big European countries have done away with the League Cup or a fourth competition, if you add a European competition. A lot of them have a league and just one cup competition. And in England, that would be the FA Cup. So with that said, the game starts, before the game starts, you learn that Eze is unavailable. You learn that Timber is unavailable. And it's like, oh, Ben White starts. But, I knew that Ben White was not going to have 90 minutes in his legs because he hadn't really had, a lot of football. And same thing is true for Kai Havertz. He might have done 90. He got close to maybe 70-ish minutes. But Kai Havertz as well hasn't played a lot of football this year. I mean, hardly played any football in 2025, period. So you're starting with these two guys who are building themselves back to fitness in a cup final. And Havertz and Gyökeres are kind of something that intrigues a lot of Arsenal fans. But it didn't work on this day. And then at the back, I don't want to say Ben White and Havertz are the reasons for Arsenal not winning this game. But I think they are a factor, right? Like, they are two guys who haven't played a lot of football and they haven't come and play in arguably the biggest game of the season because it's a cup final and the first possible cup final any team can play. And I wouldn't say Ben White was bad, but I also won't say he was great because he was neither. He was mid, he was a bit mid. And to be honest, could have helped a little bit with the goal, especially the first one. He could have helped maybe Zubimendi there. And in the second one, he kind of worries a bit too much about a player that's too far away from him and away from the goal rather than like trying to maybe, support and help close up for Zubimendi and Saka there. But neither here nor there. I don't want to single out any one player. I know a lot of people have talked about Kepa being the reason Arsenal lost this game. I think Arsenal, if they played the way they played, I know David Raya might have helped build a bit of confidence with our on ball play, but I think David Raya might have changed a thing or two. I think Arsenal lost to the better team on the day. Manchester City were the better team on the day. And I think, you can also look at the Nkapia yellow card, which was harsh, and say maybe that changed his ability to be aggressive and be on the front foot, which is the way he likes to defend. He's a defender who plays on the edge. He couldn't do that for most of this game until he needed to be substituted, which I think also came a bit late. I'm just pointing to a few things here. Anyone could go to any of those different directions and say this was the biggest reason. I'm not going to put weight to it. I think walking out of the game, I thought Ateta and Kepa were the biggest reasons. But having moved myself a little bit, from the feelings of the game and just the whole situation of losing a final and then speaking with high emotion, I think there's so many things here that Arsenal can learn from. Ateta needs to figure out how to play big teams this season. I think that's part of his homework, or big games, because there's going to be nothing but big games now. And he's won so many others in the early part of the season. However, there are a lot of players in this Arsenal team who look like they just don't have legs. They're there. You see Kai Havertz, but he doesn't look like Kai Havertz. You see Bukayo Saka, but when you watch him play, he doesn't play like Bukayo Saka. You see Ben White, the same. All of these, the last two names, Havertz and White, are obviously coming back from injury, but I think we've done this Iron Man thing, and those of you who listen to this podcast and will listen to my content, you'll have heard me talk about it. So I'm not gonna go too far into it, but I think for me that's Arteta's big problem. I think tactically he ran into an overmatch in this game, but he doesn't normally run into that. I think he was outclassed and out tactic and out thought and outsmarted in this game. And it can happen. Pep has done this to better managers than Ateta. I've seen him do it to Wenger. I've seen him do it to Mourinho. I've seen him do it to Ferguson in Champions League final matches. And Pep has got a beast record in cup finals. I mean, he's won something like 18 out of 22. So that can happen. I don't think Ateta can beat himself too much about losing to Pep in a cup final. However, I do think he didn't help himself with waiting and waiting and waiting to make subs. I think he does this thing where he overuses certain players. Then he just throws a bunch of subs when the game is out. I know he meant to make the changes at just before 1-0 and then waited after 1-0 and then it was 2-0 and the game was gone. I think he needs to figure out a few things, Ateta, where if he's gonna run with these same dudes again, we're gonna see a few more games like this. I said after Man United that we're gonna see a few more games like this if he's gonna keep running out with Zubimendi and Rice in midfield. And both of them in this game didn't look like themselves either. I think most Arsenal players in this game didn't look like themselves. Maybe Saliba, who it turns out he was playing through an injury. I think, yeah, if you want to look at the manager for this one, you can. There's no defending him for his decisions in that final and his persistence on. I know people are going to say, well, Madueke came on and didn't do well, but he came on at 2-0, and it was not Madueke special, but the team was not working. And I think it's interesting how Ateta also says, playing Kepa was the right thing to do. And, it's about, he didn't use the word harmony, squad harmony, but I'm going to use it. If he's trying to play Kepa in a cup final so that he can keep things harmonious, Norgard played in all the early rounds of this competition, then hardly played in the semi-final against Chelsea. I think he might have come on as a sub in the second leg, maybe. But for sure, nowhere near the pitch in the final. Miles Lewis-Skelly, started some of the earlier games. And so I guess it's an interesting one. I think Ateta sometimes can talk himself into corners because he likes to give answers, but he's not as bad as Liam Rosenia, but he sometimes will say stuff that's just not consistent. So I'm going to leave it there, but I just think there's a lot more for me on him and his coaching staff that they can do to help these kids. I think this is a leadership thing. I think many players, I used to say this thing in teaching, right? When I was coaching teachers or working with teachers, if most of your class failed, it's not the kids, it's the teaching, right? So, and you may say, no, but they don't listen. No. When that many players look that bad, the coaching team has something to do with that. Not just Ateta, all of them. Heinz, Airport Albert, Molina, all the coaches. They need to look at themselves. The players separately need to be doing something similar. And if they want to win the Premier League, it's there. It's there for them to take it. But Manchester City, after this final, are going to be feeling like this 9 points is not really 9 points. If you are Man City, you thinking like, well, okay, we play these lots 2 games from now in the Premier League. So they play Bournemouth, we play Chelsea. And then the next game they come to our place. If Man City goes to Stamford Bridge and wins, which they can because Liam Rosenior is doing a madness there, and Arsenal, let's say Arsenal win against Bournemouth, which is not guaranteed, but let's say both City and Arsenal win against Bournemouth. Going into the Etihad game, City will not have played the Palace game yet. They'll have that game in hand. And if Arsenal lose at the Etihad, that 6 point again, it's a very thin, I think Ian Wright put it the best. He said it's a very slim or thin, slender or thin 9 point because you have to still go to play City and they have a game in hand. That could be a 6 point swing and the margin for error. So Arsenal basically now with the news coming out that they don't have Eze, Odegaard didn't travel, so Odegaard won't have much of a match fitness before the City game if he's fit for that game. So Arsenal don't have a midfield. And I think that's another problem you could point to losing the final is that they did not have a midfield. And I think they're outmatched in midfield. City just put a lot of people who could run and physical in the middle of the park. And Declan Rice and Zubimendi couldn't really do all of that work by themselves. You play with 2 central midfielders who they were not bad, but like I feel like City ran circles around us. You know, Rice was getting pulled all over the different places, and City seemed to always find a spare man. And Ateta is going to have to think of something here. He's usually good at that, but he might have to think of, especially if you don't have these creative midfielders, he might have to think of doing a 3-4-2-1 or 3-5-2 or something like that, where he can congest the middle of the park and you can play your best players, which tend to be in the back of the team. Maybe you play with 3 centre-backs, and then you do the double pivot of Zubimendi and Rice, and then you chuck wingers into the wing back positions because it doesn't look like Miles Lewis-Kelly is going to be used. So losing this final, I don't think, and I thought this before the game, I still think this, I don't think it should affect Arsenal's season moving forward. And if it does, then all the people I've been arguing with who've been talking about Ateta's job and the state of it and how secure it is or how secure he should be in this job, then I'm going to have to say to all of them, you guys have a point. Maybe it's time for Ateta to look beyond Arsenal and for Arsenal to look beyond Ateta. I don't want that. As much as I don't always enjoy watching Arsenal this season, I enjoy the results. And I've been joking about that. I was in New Orleans at the local fan pub there, and I was talking to some of the local fans, and I was like, man, watching Arsenal is like getting canal or something or going to the dentist. I don't enjoy the process, but I find myself frequently enjoying the outcome. And that's what's been the case with Arteta. It's a bit the reverse of like the Wenger, like the late Wenger era, right, where you knew you were going to enjoy the football. But man, oh man, did you hate the outcomes? More often than not, there were very disappointing results. But the football was eye candy. It was beautiful. It was lots of rotation, relationships all over the place, carving teams open. But we were also showing our rear end, for people to score on us. With Arteta, it's like the very opposite of that. It's almost like he has overcorrected what Wenger used to do, because he's made us almost impotent attacking wise. Arsenal's attack has been a problem for almost the entirety of this season. Because even like I know at beginning parts of the season I was like, yeah, but in the Champions League we're putting teams away, but we haven't really. We've just benefited from a few good shooting nights where we overperformed our XG and we put Atletico away and we won 3-1 against Bayern, and yes, we did. I think a 4-0, 4-1 at least, whatever the score was, 3 against Sunderland. But Arsenal don't score 3 goals in games. And this final is another example of how the boys and Ateta seem to have used or seem to be very comfortable to use the defensive strength of this team as a safety blanket when they are under duress. I don't like that. I don't like how they default into defense, but this is who we are, and it's gotten us this close. But unfortunately, in April and May, March, April, May, the defense gets you here, but the offense has to meet the defense at some point to get you over the line because special players can beat defense. American people say it best, American commentators say it best. Great offense always beats great defense because the defender is always reacting to something. And I think Mikel Arteta is over investing in the defense, and you can tell by the amount of money spent in the back positions in this team versus the amount of money spent in the offensive positions in this team. And all of our match winners at Arsenal are in the defense. Does this team have, I think that's for me, I'm not going to question their mentality, but I'm going to question whether they have the resources, physically and skill wise to put teams away. They haven't been doing that. They haven't been doing that all season long. Not with our offense. We've been doing it with our defense and our offense joining in. In fact, to be fair to our defensive players, they have been contributing with opening games with set piece goals or some other kinds of goals. We've had a lot of important goals from defenders this year. And I'm not going to have a go at any of individual players. Ateta has got the players he has. I still think he can use more of the players. I think he could still use Noni Madueke more. I think he could use Miles Lewis Skelly more, especially in some of these games where some of these older dudes seem to want to keep passing sideways and not run through the midfield and break the defensive lines. Because like a lot of games we're playing a man on man. And say what you want about Miles Lewis Skelly as a defender. With that boy with the ball at his feet is a problem. He's a very forward thinking player. He can dribble and change the picture. He can pass the ball through the lines. He's not going to be the lifesaver, right? But I do think with some of these games, the amount of minutes Subimendi is playing, I don't know if we're doing him any favors. And Declan Rice too. So I do hope Miles Lewis Skelly will get minutes in midfield, or I think Ateta is going to have to. He speaks well about the squad, but I don't think he shows the squad trust enough by giving them minutes. And that's the only way you can really show belief in your team, is by giving players minutes, meaningful minutes, not garbage time minutes. So I think this cup final, in a way, it was one of those weird ones. I wanted obviously to win it, but I can't be happier that it's done now. I hope that whatever lessons can be learned from that are learned by Arsenal, because City showed us, almost like Thomas Tuchel showed us in that Champions League quarter-final game 2 years ago, where he just told his Bayern team to just stand on the right half of the pitch, and we were nullified. We lost by a single goal. We drew 2-2 at our place, and we lost 1-0 away at Bayern. City basically stood on the defenders and let the keeper have the ball, and they grew into the game from there. And then they just popped it around us. And we were having some very low numbers of possession, low 30s, mid 30s, for long stretches of that game. And they were having some beautiful time on the ball. Now, they didn't cut us open. You know what I mean? It was 2 moments of lapse of concentration, and they capitalized. But you do that because they put Arsenal's defending core, and the whole team was defending. They put them under duress. And so people lost runners, and Kepa made a schoolboy error. I don't want to talk about Kepa. I don't. I think he's been spoken about enough. I think City created their luck, right? They only had 2 goals and 2 shots on target, and they scored 2 goals. You can talk about whether Havertz could have done better, and I think he should have done better, but we didn't create much either. So Arteta's margins football, that's something he's going to really have to think about. I don't know who at Arsenal is the person who talks to him about this stuff that he listens to, but nothing, it doesn't seem to be changing in terms of approach. We're doubling down on our defending. People were making a joke that we came to a final to try and draw the final. I don't think he was trying to draw the final, but he had a plan that seemed to be leaning towards stay in the game and then let's try to nick it. Manchester City had a harder game against Leeds United, and they had a harder game against Nottingham Forest than they did against the league leaders. Teta has to look at himself for that one, I think. And I think the coaching staff has to look at themselves for that one. I know this team's missed some critical players, but intent and attitude has nothing to do with who's on the pitch. You could still show belief and try to threaten them. And if you don't think you can play through the press, then go route one. Push everybody up and go route one and go like, go full on Pulis, go full on Allardyce. Don't be doing half and half, like half Pep, half Paradise. That's not gonna work. He needs to commit to something. And he has 10 days or so to figure it out. Because games are gonna come thick and fast and City's out of the Champions League. And I just hope he figures this out for the sake of all people who love Arsenal, including myself and himself, because I think he's done well to get this team and club to where it is. Fail to win one of the big ones, it's going to be hard for him to come back to to another season, and it's going to be hard for some of these players to buy into the messaging. And he has one more year left in his contract. So I hope for everybody involved and who loves Arsenal that he gets over the line with this one, with this Premier League and maybe one other. But even if it's just the Premier League, I'll honestly be like, job well done. Let's go into the summer, reinforce where possible, and go back into a new season with him, because it'd be stupid for the club or anyone to fire a coach who just won the Premier League. But anyway, I'm going to stop right there. I hope all is well with everybody. The international break is an opportunity to reflect for everyone. I hope everybody kind of takes a break from club football and enjoys some of the internationals or just time with family and friends. The football will be back. Before you know it, it's going to be every 3 days again. All right. Cheers, guys.